Okay everyone, we're going to go ahead and start making our fresh evergreen wreath on a wire frame. You'll need a paddle wire. I use about the 22 gauge and some type of snips. If your greenery is already cut down, then you can just break your branches or use small snips like this. If you're getting them off of a larger branch, you might need heavier duty pruners. So I'm going to unwrap my wire by just a few inches and put about 2 inches under that inside rim. Now if your frame is curved, I keep the curved side up. That's what we're going to build on. And I am going to wrap that 2 inches around nice and tight so that I am attaching the paddle wire to the metal frame. I'm going to position this so that the paddle wire is in the middle of the wreath and where I just attached it is facing me. I'm going to do a few practice wraps, pulling the wire under the wreath frame towards me, pulling tight, and then back to the center. And every time I go back to the center, I'm essentially going to be securing some greenery bundles to the frame. Some greenery might bother your hands, so I like to wear gardening gloves when I'm going to be working with greenery. So the majority of the greenery I'm using today is spruce. That's what I'm grabbing first. That's going to help me build the base of all of my bundles. You could use fir or pine. I do have some pine that I'll be using here today and also some cedar for accents, but my heavier duty pieces I'm going to put down first. It's fine if it's shaped like the tip of the bough, and it's fine if it's more like the center branch and doesn't look real great. Those bulkier stems can be the bottom of your bundles. So once I lay it down, I'm going to just continue that motion, wrapping each bundle 3 times. Now the video is positioned a little differently in view, but actually I have this wreath frame so that the bundles are facing the left, and I'm holding the bundles with my left hand, and I'm wrapping the wire with my right hand. And then I'm just going to continue building to the left. So every time I'm ready for a new bundle, I'll just rotate that frame slightly so that I'm still pulling towards myself each time. So I'm going to make a new bundle. If I have any pieces that are too long, I can cut them off. You can do symmetrical bundles every time, or you can do something a little more random. I want to cover that wire wrap that we just made on the first bundle with about the top third of this next bundle. So lay it down, make sure that you're covering your wire frame, especially on the outside. You want to be mindful of that outside shape every time you're laying down a bundle. I'll give it another 3 wraps, holding it, pulling it tight every time, and then slightly rotating again so that the wire is facing me each time. Grabbing the bulkier stems for the base, and then the more delicate stems for the top of the bundle. I'm going to continue this fashion in the same direction, overlapping that wire by about 1/3 of the next bundle all the way around. It's helpful every now and then if you hold it up in front of you like you would view it on a door. And it's helpful as you're placing the bundles to keep an eye on both the inside and outside rims, your borders. Be aware that you always can go back in later and add some greenery if needed. And you certainly can also trim some greenery if it's not laying how you like it once it's finished. If you got your kit before you are ready to create, I suggest keeping the greens in a cool location, outdoors preferably. They'll be fine out of water as long as it's in a cool environment, for a few days to wait for you to get your wreath put together when it's the time that's convenient for you. And the care for the wreath once you hang it outdoors is to allow it to receive some moisture a couple times a week if temperatures are above 40 degrees. Once things get cold for the winter and they stay below freezing for most of the time, your evergreens should stay just fine. But for those first few weeks, you might have temperatures consistently above that freezing mark or in the 40s or 50s. In that case, I'd want your wreath to get rained on. I'd want it to get spritzed by a spritzer, the front and back a couple times a week. If you know it's going to rain, you could place it outside flat on the lawn overnight. Or if it snows and it hasn't received any moisture for a few days, you can just lay it down in the snow for a little while. I'm going to speed up the video slightly for the next 2 minutes just because it's repetitive. I am making my branches more of in a random style, but you can choose any way you want. You can always just piece in a few little bits at a time to cover maybe the inside or the outside frame if your full bundles aren't covering both edges at once. If you're cutting down greenery bundles yourself, you'll want to arrive at about 6 to 8 inches in length for your pieces. Depending on the greenery that you have available or that you choose, and depending on if you angle your stems really far outwards or keep them kind of flowing in the same form as the frame, you can really alter the outcome and the desired look of your wreath. This is a basic wreath with just the greenery and a bow, but you certainly can add once you have your base done. You can use the same paddle wire to wire in some pine cones or some little bits of berries. I would just do that individually. You would just cut your wire a foot long, wrap it around whatever embellishment you want to put on the wreath, and then, secure that to the back of the wreath. Remember to pull that wire tight with each wrap, as over time the greens will lose moisture and slightly shrink, and being in the wind and things can loosen some of your greenery if it isn't real secure to the frame. This is a 14-inch wire frame, which usually ends up finishing around 20 inches, the style that I do. But again, depending on the size of your cuts and the way that you're angling them, you could even get a larger wreath with this same frame size. When you're getting to the end, your last few bundles, you may need to cut the stems a little bit shorter than you've been working with before. You'll want to lift those first branches that you place down to expose the frame where you can lay the stems. And as you're wrapping the wire, you want to be careful that you're not totally smashing down that first bundle that you put on when you started the wreath. You'll need to kind of weave the wire so that it's securing your last few bundles, but not causing your first bit of greenery to be too tight to the form. I'm going to do one last bundle here and flip it over, get ready to tie it off. Oftentimes this start and stopping point is where people will place the bow because it's a little bit tricky to get it completely uniform throughout. But once it's done, you still should be able to manipulate the greeneries a little bit to see if you need to do anything to make it more uniform throughout. Any twisting of the greenery, any cutting of the greenery. And then you can determine where you want to put your bow. And if you want to have it hanging from the top of the wreath, from the bottom of the wreath, or even a side of the wreath. I wait and decide that once my base is completely done. To finish it off, that last bundle, you'll just give the same 3 tight wraps with the wire, and then you'll turn your wreath completely upside down and trim off about 4 to 6 inches, leave a tail, and cut from the paddle wire. Then you'll just take that piece of wire, give it an extra tug to be sure it is secure, and then find a piece of wire that is made up of the frame to wrap it tightly around. Any last little bit sticking out from that wire can be tucked down inside the wreath. I'm going to go ahead and make a simple bow using a 3-foot length piece of wire, ribbon wire that I'm going to just tie a bow, and I'm going to use that extra piece of paddle wire of about 1 foot in length to secure it. So you'll want to cut yourself a piece of that paddle wire first, then grab your ribbon, fold it in half, and then move your fingers down about 1/3 of the way on each side, making loops and tying them inside each other. This works great with a ribbon that is double-sided or one solid color. If you have a printed ribbon, you'll have to manipulate the center knot a little bit. So before I tie it tight, I'm going to insert that piece of wire. Again, I cut from my paddle about 12 to 18 inches in length. I'm going to stick that through the back before I tighten it on. I'm going to take a few minutes to get the loops the size that I want them to be and to make sure that the bow is tied tightly. So it takes a few times to just knot it tightly and then pull on the tails to shorten the loops. Once the loops are the same size, you can check the length of your tails to be sure that they're about the same. You can decide if you want to leave the cuts flat like they are here, or if you want to dovetail them or angle them. But again, you would need to kind of fold over that center knot if you are using a printed ribbon that is printed on one side, because most likely that center knot is going to show the back side of those types of ribbons. But it's real easy just to take a minute and maneuver that knot, the top little bit of it, to expose the printed side that you want to see. Go ahead and give that a twist on to secure the bow to the wire. And now we're just going to separate those two wires, put one through the center of the wreath and one around the outside of the wreath. And again, we'll kind of twist tie that in the back. Pull it real tight, wrap it around a few times. My wire is a little bit long, so I'm going to cut a few inches off of excess. And then those last few inches that are hanging out there, I can wrap around the frame and then tuck back into the wreath. And you're ready to hang this. It's a great gift. It's a great way to enjoy nature. It's a great welcome to your front door or anywhere on your decor that you want to enjoy some fresh greens really throughout the entire winter season.